Hi Booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. It seems like over the last, I don't know, month or so perhaps, there's been something of a whole war going on. Various people on various different channels have been provoking each other and showing their strength by flaunting their recent purchases on the rest of Booktube, and I mean, I myself have been guilty of doing that, and it seems that the tension has been rising, and I don't want to necessarily make things worse. I don't want a book haul catastrophe to happen, and yet I have been picking up books, and they have been amassing, and so that's what we have today. My book haul. It does seem like most of the haul wars have been taking place on the other side of the Atlantic, but I kind of feel like William Blake during the American Revolution, just sort of champing at the bit and wanting to get involved. And so here we are. This is a big pile of books, so we'll see how quickly we get through it. We'll start at the beginning, and I've picked up, well, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I picked up Emily Wilson's recent translation of the Iliad. I think it came out last year, and I read her translation of the Odyssey. Whoops, nearly dropped it. There it is. And I thought I'd sort of wait for the paperback to come out, so they're sort of matching. So they both have the deckled edges and the French flaps and things like that. The only thing I don't particularly love, and I didn't notice it in the bookshop, but it's that, I mean, they're similar. But looking at the spines, just how much bigger the Iliad is compared to the Odyssey here. Yeah, it just it annoyed me a little bit. And let's have a look. Okay, yeah, and where Homer is somewhere else as well. So we have Homer down there, whereas Homer's across the top. Maybe it's to do with how long the Odyssey is in comparison to the Iliad as a word. I don't know. But anyway, I'm looking forward to giving this translation of the Iliad a go. So far, I've just read it in the Fitzgerald translation. I also have the Fagles translations of both available as ebooks, and so I'm thinking of later this year doing a massive, well, not a massive, but a dive into the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I'll read and reread these, and also read the Fagles as well, and just see which I prefer. I probably won't read the Fitzgeralds. that might be overkill. Next up, I picked up a copy of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. The keen-eyed among you will have noticed that relatively recently I read To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf in a Wordsworth Classics that I don't have anymore, because I've been eyeing this up for some time, and so I got rid of that one and replaced it with this, and it was for a similar thing with the Iliad and the Odyssey, is that Vintage Classics do this lovely line of Virginia Woolf's books, and so I have Mrs. Dalloway in a similar edition, and I'm thinking of rereading both books before I go on to more by Virginia Woolf. That's my plan for progressing with her works. Next up, we have The Periodic Table by Primo Levi. I have If This Is a Man, and trying to remember the companion book to that. Is it The Truce or something like that? Anyway, both are unread on my shelves. But I wanted to get this as well, and then out of his works, this was what sort of intrigued me the most. So I'll read the synopsis to this one. I won't read the synopsis to all of them. But in these haunting reflections, Primo Levi, a chemist by training, takes the elements of the periodic table as his inspiration. He ranges from young love to political savagery, and from the inert gas argon and inert relatives like the uncle who stayed in bed for 22 years to life-giving carbon. Iron honours the mountain-climbing resistance hero who put iron in Levi's student soul. Cerium recalls the improvised cigarette lighters which saved his life in Auschwitz, while Vanadium describes an eerie post-war correspondence with the man who had been his quote-unquote boss there. So it's a sort of memoir, but a kind of side-on memoir, which I find interesting, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to know Primo Levi a little bit better. And I think I've, in the space of a minute or two, pronounced his name 3 different ways. Next, this one I'm entirely blaming on Steve Donahue. A couple of weeks ago for his Daily Penguin, he showed this, and I had no idea that this book, this particular edition and selection, existed, and so I had to pick up a copy. Franz Kafka, the Metamorphosis and other stories, in a Penguin Deluxe edition, which I love. I love. I mean, particularly the front cover. I like. Not a massive fan of the back cover, but I do like these French flaps in here, and I just had absolutely no idea that this existed. And this is all translated by Michael Hoffman. I've got the complete short stories, which is a selection across different translators. So you've got all the stories, but a sort of hodgepodge of different translators across the whole thing. So this is a selection of stories, but it's one translator's voice. So I thought that would be an interesting contrast to the stories that I already have. And it has a number of his most famous stories: Metamorphosis, The Judgments. It's got, I think it's got A Country Doctor in here, yeah, and In the Penal Colony, and A Hunger Story, and a few other, A Hunger Artist. Sorry, reading 2 things at once. And yeah, I think slowly building up something of a Kafka collection. So we'll see where that takes me in the future. Next up, another author that I'm building up something of a collection of, and that's John le Carré. And this is The Honourable Schoolboy. Oh, you can see me there reflected. Look at that. You might be able to see just up there in a similar edition, I have Smiley's People. And recently I read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which I think is downstairs. And I didn't want to jump to Smiley's People, which I already had, before reading this, the preceding book, The Honourable Schoolboy. So I wanted to get to this. I don't know too much about it, other than it's set in Hong Kong. So I'll be asking my my brother-in-law for notes on how accurate the depiction is. But yeah, it's more spily. I think I've heard that this is a little more brutal and hard-hitting than Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but I'll see. This will probably be the next le Carré that I read. And then I've got a chunk of poetry books. I thought I'd get them all done in one go before moving on to the rest of the books. Well, this is a book about poetry rather than a collection of poetry or anything like that. This is On Poetry by Glyn Maxwell, which I've heard recommended in a number of places, probably most recently by Bren from Bren Booth Jones. And I've been meaning to read his poetry for ages. I don't have any of his poetry, but I've just heard this little book about poetry recommended. Simon Armitage says it's the most compelling, original, charismatic and poetic guide to poetry that I can remember. A handbook written from the hearts by one of the true modern masters of the craft. So these essays illustrate Maxwell's poetic philosophy that the greatest verse arises from a harmony of mind and body, and that poetic forms originate in human necessities, breath, heartbeat, footstep, posture. He speaks of his inspirations, his models, and takes us inside the strange world of the creative writing class, where 4 young hopefuls grapple with love, sex, cheap wine, and hard work, illustrated with examples from canonical poets. This is a beautiful and accessible guide to the most ancient and sublime of the realms of literature. So yeah, at some point I'll be getting to that. Another book inspired by someone else that I've been meaning to get. This one I saw from James from Quaint and Curious Volumes. This is Wisława, I'm not going to be able to say her name correctly, Wisława Szymborska, People on a Bridge. The title poem James read out probably, I don't know, maybe even like a year ago or something. I've been meaning to get to her for ages, and so just the name recognition of having heard that poem and seeing this collection, I decided to get it. So yeah, looking forward. This one, I don't know, it just seemed like an interesting title. This is Wings of Hope and Daring by Ira Sternberg. I think she is Swedish. No, sorry, a Finnish poet. And is this from like the 1980s? This selection. Well, yeah, reprinted in 1992. And so yeah, I don't know too much about it. And yeah, being a slim poetry collection, there's not really much to say about it before reading it. Next up, we have the selected poems of Randall Jarrell, and it contains the entire collection, The Woman at the Washington Zoo. And again, a poet I've read like sort of 1 or 2 poems by in anthologies and things like that, and have been meaning to get to him for ages. And I saw this, and I thought it was quite a nice, sort of simple, sort of quite handsome volume. And so again, a poet that I'm looking forward to getting to know much better. And then here's an interesting one. So that Kafka volume was all translated by Michael Hoffman. He's also a poet in his own right, and this is one of his collections. This is One Lark, One Horse, and again, I just bought this out of curiosity. I've read some of his translations. Maybe probably the book I've enjoyed by him the most was Alone in Berlin, or I think in America it's called A Man Dies Alone, and it's just a phenomenal book, and I thought he did an amazing job translating it, and wanted to see what his original work is like. So this is One Lark, One Horse by Michael Hoffman. For me, this is like for sort of an original poetry collection, it's like just the right size. I'm not sure how it translates. It's about 90 pages or so, I think. So it's not like a slim 50-page thing, but it's not a fat sort of 300-page thing or something like that. It's, yeah, I don't know. For poetry, it's just the right size for me. And then the last one, which for me is a real treat, maybe not for everyone. This is T.S. Eliot, the complete poems and plays. I have bits and bobs. I have The Wasteland and 4 quartets in sort of by themselves, and then I had his selected poems. I had one of his plays, Murder in the Cathedral. So it was all sort of here and there and hodgepodgey. And I saw this, and this is everything. It even has, I was flipping through some of his poems in French, which haven't been translated. So we'll see how that goes. But it was mainly for the plays. I've been meaning to go through all of T.S. Eliot's plays at some point, and would have just found it tedious to try and track down individual volumes of them, and so was very glad to find this in a bric-a-brac shop where, when I was buying it, the owner was saying that T.S. Eliot is one of her favourite writers, and she was kind of secretly hoping that no one would buy this, and so I felt a little bit bad walking out with it, but I guess that's just, that's the aim of the game. And then back to some fiction. This one, I picked up this one sort of on name recognition from the title. I'm sure I'd heard someone recommending this, but can't remember where. And again, it was at the same bric-a-brac shop. It was for like £1. Wolf Solent by John Cooper Powys. And yeah, it doesn't say too much about it on the back. It seems to be a kind of post First World War modernist kind of thing, from what I can tell. Let's have a look. In this monumental work, which has been described as one of the few great apocalyptic novels of our time, John Cooper Powys deftly revolves the issues of life and death, good and evil, matter and spirit, reality and appearance, in the war and peace between opposites. So, again, yeah, saying a lot without really saying anything at all. Next up, we've got Euripides, and this is Alcestis. Probably not saying that right. So we have Hippolytus, Iphigenia in Taurus, and Alcestis. And this is the Philip Valcott translation. I read his translation of the Oresteia, I think, now that they're on the other side of the room. Yeah, I've read, no, the Eumenides. Anyway, I've enjoyed his translations before of Aeschylus, and so I'm going to try Euripides and see how it goes. And I love these early Penguin classics as well. Next up, a bit of an odd one. Yeah, not sure what I'll think of it. This is The Undiscovered Self by C.G. Jung. I do quite like the sort of idea of the cover being that it's a mirror. I'll just sort of show you random bits of the room instead. And yeah, there's nothing on the back for me to read you. Oh no, it's in there. But let's have a look at the table of contents. So he's talking about the plight of the individual self in modern society, religion as the counterbalance to mass-mindedness, the position of the West on the question of religion, the individual's understanding of himself, the philosophical and psychological approach to life, self-knowledge, and then the meaning of self-knowledge. Would it be more helpful to have the meaning of self-knowledge before self-knowledge? I'm not sure. Yeah, I find Jung interesting when it comes to not necessarily just ideas of storytelling in, people like him for archetypes and things. I prefer him as a way to think about how stories join up to each other and speak to each other. And that's what I like him for in these sort of excerpts that I've read from him before. With the stuff like that, I find him a bit strange and a bit out there. And so, yeah, I sort of bought that more as a kind of challenge to myself more than anything else. Next up, again, a nice old penguin. This is Rabelais, Gargantua, and Pantagruel. Or is it supposed to be Pantagruel? I don't know. But anyway, Sean D. Standfast, I think, really loves this book. And recently it was discussed by Matthew from Maybury Book Club. And it sounds like a whale of a time. And, quite a nice chunky thing of around about 700 pages. And this is, well, it says a new translation, but it's 70 years old by J.M. Cohen. So again, we'll see how Gargantua and Pantagruel goes. And then to finish up the book haul, I've got 4 books that were a bit of a sort of a rabbit hole for me. As you've kind of seen with, I suppose a little bit with Virginia Woolf there, but certainly with like John le Carré, that there are certain authors where I feel like I need to sort of build up a bit of a collection of and slowly make my way through. And it's certainly this way for this author. I've read a few books by him, and I'll be certainly rereading them. But I picked up these as the next few to get to. And that's W.G. Sebald. So out of his major novels, his sort of major works, the only one I haven't read from the main 4 is The Immigrants, which is essentially looking at, I think, 4 immigrants? 4 Jewish emigres in the 20th century, and sort of connecting their lives together to a certain amount. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It seems, at least from the framing of it, that it's the most obviously fictional of all of his books, I think. So we'll see how we get on with The Immigrants. The other 3 books that are sort of in there as a sort of main sort of core books would be Vertigo, The Rings of Saturn, and Austerlitz. So far, Austerlitz probably being my favourite at the moment. And then a couple of other books that are really sort of books of essays by him. We've got A Place in the Country, which is, I think, 3 essays sort of linked together. Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I think 5. No, 6. Just keeps going up. 6 essays on essentially, I think, 6 German writers, or not even all German, but just 6 writers that he enjoys. And I think their sort of relationship to landscapes. I will read the sort of synopsis to this. When W.G. Sebald travelled to Manchester in 1966, he packed in his bags certain literary favourites which would remain central to him throughout the rest of his life and during the years when he was settled in England. In A Place in the Country, he reflects on 6 of the figures who shaped him as a person and as a writer, including Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Robert Walser, and Jean-Peter Tripp. Fusing biography and essay, and finding, as ever, inspiration in place, as when he journeys to the Ile Saint-Pierre, the tiny, lonely Swiss island where Jean-Jacques Rousseau found solace and inspiration. Sebald lovingly brings his subjects to life in his distinctive, inimitable voice. So I thought that sounded really quite lovely, and maybe potentially a slightly softer, lighter side to Sebald, if this covers anything, is saying anything. Next is more typical Sebald, quite dark by the sounds of things, and again, I only have Steve Donahue to blame when he brought this up in a library tour video recently, and when I saw it, I just knew I had to add it to my Sebald collection. It's on the natural history of destruction, which is really all about the silence surrounding the Western bombings, or the Allied bombings of, I think, particularly Dresden, and the destruction and horror of that, and that's sort of always the backbone underneath almost everything that Sebald is writing, is about being someone whose parents lived through the Second World War, and he was German, sort of dealing with either the trauma or the shame of being German through the Second World War, and how that permeates, and particularly the silence of it. So the silence on the German side of just wanting to move on and forget, just the utter darkness of sort of the 30s and the 40s, and yeah, it just sort of being scrubbed clean. It's scrubbed clean for an entire generation. But then there's other silence on the other side of the atrocities committed by the good guys, and I think he finds all of that very interesting. So yeah, in a morbid way, I'm looking forward to On the Natural History of Destruction. And then finally, the last book in this book haul is about, but not by, Sebald, and that is Speak Silence in Search of W.G. Sebald by Claire, what's the surname? Angier? Angier? And it's a biography, relatively recent, I believe, and I'm not sure to what extent it's going to be delving into the work itself, into the writing, and the sort of hidden inner self that's sort of always there in his writing, or whether it really is more his, really his life. I mean, yeah, it does seem like there are whole chapters for the Immigrants, the Rings of Saturn, and Austerlitz, so we'll see. But yeah, either way, I'm looking forward to diving into it. At some point soon, I'll be reading a lot of W.G. Sebald. And then there we go. That is a book haul that was really quite peaceful, with the exception of the Allied bombings of Dresden. That, yeah, it was quite peaceful. So I'm not entirely sure what people are talking about with all of these book haul wars. I think it's all very amiable and very fine. Don't worry about it. I'll show you all the books before I go. Speak Silence by Claire Angier. Maybe I'll learn how to say her name. I mean, I've got so many names to learn how to say in this book haul. On the Natural History of Destruction by W.G. Sebald. A Place in the Country, also by W.G. Sebald. We have The Immigrants, once again, by W.G. Sebald. We have Gargantuan and Pantagruel by Rabelais. We have The Undiscovered Self by C.G. Jung. We have Alcestis by Euripides. We have Wolf Solent by John Cooper Powys. We have, maybe I'll have to do this in 2 goes, I don't know, it's a really big book haul. We have The Complete Poems and Plays by T.S. Elliot. Let's readjust. There we go. We have One Lark, One Horse by Michael Hoffman. We have the selected poems of Randall Jarrell. We have Wings of Hope and Daring by Iri Stenberg. We have People on a Bridge by Uslora Slimporska. We have Glenn Maxwell on poetry. We have John le Carré, Smiley's People. We have Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis and Other Stories, translated by Michael Hoffman. We have Primo Levi, The Periodic Table, translated by Raymond Rosenthal. We have Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse. And finally, we have the Iliad by Emily Wilson. Let's have a look. So there we go. A very modest book haul, I think you'd agree. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Please let me know. Please let me know if any of you have watched this. That was almost a disaster. I hope you survived. And for now, take care. Bye bye.